Shelly Finkel, the entity you can see here, looking like he just stepped out of a UFO in Area 51. he he's done this interview with Fight Hype, and in this interview, he's claiming that he has proof that Eddie Hearn never wanted the Joshua Wilder fight next, and that it was a bluff all along, and that Hearn actually had a 2-fight deal in place with Wembley long ago, before the negotiations started. And he kind of implies that the 2-fight Wembley deal is the reason that Hearn don't want the Wilder fight next. That's what he implies. Now, obviously the Wilder fanboys are saying, oh, he's proved Eddie Hearn wrong with facts and he's done it. He hasn't done anything. He didn't show any documents. He can't prove that Eddie Hearn had the Wembley deal before negotiations with Wilder started. He can't prove that that was the reason that Eddie Hearn, in his in Shelly Finkel's view, didn't want the Joshua Wilder fight. He can't prove any of the stuff he's talking about. He's just running off at the mouth, and somehow the Wilder fanboys take this as evidence that he has debunked Hearn and all kinds of madness. But when you look at Team Wilder, they did one of the strangest things I've ever seen a boxing team ever do in my entire life of several decades following this sport. And that was when they made Anthony Joshua a one-time only, take it or leave it offer with a 24-hour time limit and no contract. That was one of the strangest things I've ever seen in boxing. The only time you give someone a 24-hour time limit as your first offer is if you're trying to get a late substitute in. When you're trying to organize a super fight, a pay-per-view event, and you've got plenty of time to organize it, you don't make an offer with a 24-hour time limit attached to it if you're actually serious about making the fight. And you certainly don't refuse to send any terms of the agreement or draft cut. You certainly don't do that. And what was even more strange from Team Wilder was when they refused to meet Eddie Hearn to have a sit-down meeting in the days that followed that bizarre 24-hour take it or leave it offer. I cannot for the life of me work out what on earth was going on there. It clearly wasn't, there was clearly an air of theatricality to it. It clearly wasn't a serious offer at that point. It was intended to do something else. Now, what it was intended to do, we can speculate on all day. At the same time, Team Joshua have also done some strange things and said some strange things. Now, there's been a small minority of people, but they've been saying this consistently, all right? There's a small minority of people who I've noticed commenting on some of my videos who keep telling me, Hatman, all of this is fake. This failed negotiation is fake. Finkel and Hearn are in cahoots with each other. The fighters may not know about it, but Finkel and the Hearns are fabricating a beef between the two camps in order to build up this fight. This is what some people are telling me, and they've been saying this consistently. That is the only way to explain the bizarre behavior of this entity right here, and some of the questionable behavior of Team Joshua too. They say that, look at the fact that Finkel and Barry Hearn go back a long way. They're old friends. Barry Hearn flew out to New York to talk to Shelly Finkel. What did he talk about? So basically, the theory goes, I've explained it, but let me just try and make it more concise and clear for you. The theory goes that old friends Shelly Finkel and Barry Hearn, along with his son Eddie, got together and said, you know what? We both want this fight, but it needs building more. Because at the end of the day, we don't know which of our fighters is going to win this fight for sure. So we want to capitalize to the absolute maximum for ourselves. Yeah, we're making money for our fighters, but we're also making money for ourselves. So if one of us has got to take a hit in the pocket, if one of our fighters loses afterwards and their market value drops significantly, we need to be compensated now for that event, for that particular scenario. So let's get together. Let's create a fake beef between the two camps. We're going to say horrible stuff about each other. And this is going to generate interest because we know that controversy sells. We know that nationalism is a good way to sell sporting events by stirring up national pride. Us against them. We know this. We're experienced men. Shelly Finkel's in his 80s. Barry Hearn's in his 70s, I believe. We know how human beings' minds work psychologically. So let's exploit that. And we can both get paid off this. Now, the crucial thing we need to do is not let our fighters know what we're doing. Because if we tell our fighters that this is going to be a fake beef, they might not take to it kindly, and they might not be very good actors. Deontay is a very impulsive guy. Joshua's a very kind of bland personality on camera. It's better if we keep the fighters in the dark about the fact that we've manufactured this beef between the two camps. So the fighters actually believe what we're telling them. They actually believe that this is a real beef. And that way we're going to get real visceral reactions from our fighters going at each other. We're going to get real frustration from our fighters. And that's going to stir up the emotion in their respective fan bases. And that will help build this fight into an enormous event. That's the theory. All right, I was speaking in the first person as if I was Shelly Finkel or Barry Hearn or Eddie Hearn. That is the theory going round. And I think it's a reasonable theory. I don't think it's ridiculous at all. The idea that two experienced groups of people who have known each other for many years may get together and collaborate in this kind of way. I don't think that's absurd at all. It's a little cynical because keeping their fighters in the dark about it is a little off in the minds of most people, I would imagine. But boxing has always been like that. Boxing has always been a sport where the guys who are the managers and promoters, etc., treat the fighters like they're foolish. Treat the fighters like they don't know anything. This has been the reality in boxing for decades and decades. Now we think it's going on less today than it used to back in the days, but I can't imagine it's disappeared entirely. I mean, if you look at people like Joe Louis, for example, Joe Louis and Max Schmeling, one of his opponents, they were used by their respective countries as tools of propaganda during the Second World War. Yeah, that's fact. That's known fact that they were used as propaganda tools. Fighters like Sonny Liston, was not, he was known as a mob fighter. He was somebody that was controlled by the Italian American mafia. And again, we are talking about some stuff that happened a very long time ago, but I can't imagine it's disappeared completely. And the theory which is being proposed here isn't as exploitative as what was going on back then. It is obviously dishonest and devious, but at the end of the day, the fighters are still getting paid. They just may not be aware of the fact that the two management groups, promotional groups, are colluding behind the scenes to build up the hype for the fight. And one crucial thing that Shelly Finkel says in this, well, two crucial things that he says in this interview. And one of the things he says, well, both things go against what the Wilder fanboys have been saying. One, Shelly Finkel says he does not believe Anthony Joshua is afraid of Deontay Wilder. Now that's Deontay Wilder's own manager. Okay, he's privy to what's going on behind the scenes contractually and all that. And he is saying that he does not believe Joshua's afraid. So where's all the Wilder are the Wilder fanboys talking about that? Of course they're not talking about that, because these are not rational people. Shelly Finkel's saying he don't think Joshua's afraid. And he kind of implies that Team Joshua do want the fight. And of course they want the fight. They've made him an offer. Right? Which is still on the table now. An offer he can sign, a contract he can sign right now. So of course Team Joshua want the fight. The only dispute that Shelly Finkel raises in this particular interview is when they want the fight. He says they don't want the fight this year. They really want it in April, and they really wanted it in April all along. That's what he's saying. But he's certainly not saying Joshua's afraid, like most of the Wilder fanboys are saying. And importantly, he seems open to accepting the offer in April. That is the most important thing that comes across in this particular interview, because the bottom line for me is I want to see the fight. Never mind all the he say, she say, fanboy wars and all this kind of rubbish. Yeah, it's mild entertainment, but at the end of the day, the bottom line for me is I want to see the two guys square off in the ring. And the fact that Shelly Finkel is leaning towards saying that there can still be a fight in April and that they're not walking away to do something else, that's encouraging to me. Now, Shelly Finkel implies that, or straight out says, that they'll be looking for more than 15 million for a fight in April. And that's reasonable, because the fight is going to be bigger in April than it is now. With all this back and forth between the two camps, it's done a good job at hyping up the fight and generating more interest. So negotiating for more than 15 million for a fight at Wembley in April, I've got no issue with that. Just as long as a deal can actually be done and they do eventually sign. Now, if Team Joshua are not willing to offer more than 15 million, would that be greedy? Definitely. But at the same time, as greedy as it might be, if they're not willing to budge from the 15 million, it would still be a very, very bad move by Wilder and his team to walk away from the 15 million. Because 15 million is what? 4 or 5 times more than Deontay Wilder's ever made before. With Anthony Joshua, as I've mentioned before, the 50 million that he was offered, that is not 4 or 5 times more than he's made before in his career. No, not at all. You see, Joshua doesn't stand to multiply his purse as many times as Deontay Wilder does from this fight. Multiply his average per... No. Anthony Joshua's earned 20 million plus for fights before. And I'm talking about in pounds. So in dollars, you're talking about what, the high 20s or $30 million plus. So it would be worse for Wilder to walk away from negotiations than Joshua from a financial point of view. That's what it would be. And of course, there are accusations flying back and forth from both teams. Eddie Hearn is saying that Team Wilder never really wanted to fight. They were just using it to promote themselves. They were just trying to increase their popularity by using Anthony Joshua's name. This is what Team Hearn are accusing Team Wilder of. But as I said earlier on in the video, there are some people who say, you know what, Hatman, this is all a big game. It's all theatre. It's all just a way for the two teams to promote the fight, build it up, and put money in the pocket of Shelly Finkel and Eddie Hearn. And obviously the fighters get paid, but do you honestly think that Shelly Finkel's only thinking about Deontay Wilder's pockets? Do you honestly think that Eddie Hearn is only thinking about Anthony Joshua's pockets? Of course not. They're thinking about their own pockets. And when you're talking about a fight of this magnitude, when you're talking about two teams putting their most highly paid fighters on the line, their two biggest commodities on the line, then of course they want to be financially compensated for that. Eddie Hearn has nobody who brings in remotely as much money for him as Anthony Joshua. And to a lesser extent, Deontay Wilder is one of the biggest earners, certainly, if not, maybe not the biggest earner, but he's certainly one of the biggest earners. Perhaps the biggest, I don't know. That Shelly Finkel or Al Haymon has right now outside of Floyd Mayweather. And he has the potential to be an even bigger earner. So they're not going to put his unbeaten record on the line against by far the most dangerous fighter he's ever faced in a fight of this magnitude without taking care of their own pockets. They're not going to do that. Shelly Finkel, Al Haymon, etc. They have a vested interest in hyping this fight up and making it as big as possible. They know. You think Shelly Finkel don't know that controversy sells? You think he don't know the methods needed to manipulate fans? You think these people don't know that? These are experienced boxing men, Shelly Finkel and the Hearns. So I don't know whether this theory of collusion behind the scenes between the two camps is true. I'm not saying it is, but it's certainly not beyond the realms of possibility as far as I'm concerned, and it would make sense of a lot of the strange behavior, because perhaps a lot of the strange behavior coming from both camps was just theatricality to stir up emotions in the fans, get people outraged, because outrage sells. If you can do something which is perceived to be outrageous, it's going to generate a stir, and that's what you want when you're building up a fight like this. The only thing which kind of goes against this idea that, or this theory that there's collusion between the two teams, is the fact that Joshua and Wilder are probably both going to fight somebody else before they fight each other. You see, if it was a situation where the two camps are colluding, why would they risk having these interim fights? It's a risk for both teams, particularly for Team Joshua, because Alexander Povetkin is very dangerous indeed. Far more dangerous, in my opinion, than Dominic Breazeale is, and that's who Deontay Wilder is likely to face next. Certainly Breazeale's been saying that he's going to fight Wilder. So that's one thing which would go against this theory. It wouldn't disprove the theory altogether at all. Maybe both teams are just that confident that their guy can beat the man in front of them. And in Joshua's case, it is a mandatory, right? they have to fight Povetkin sooner or later. So anyway, I'm going to leave it at that. This interview, you know, Finkel basically babbles on and he doesn't produce any documents or anything. He just says Hearn had the Wembley deal in place. Well, how does he know that? How can he prove that? And how can he prove that the Wembley deal proves that Team Joshua never wanted the Wilder fight this year? You know, it's all babble, it's all nonsense. But the heartening thing, the encouraging thing to take from it is the fact that he believes Joshua's not scared. He believes Team Joshua do want the fight. They just want it in 2019 and not in 2018. So that's encouraging, and hopefully we'll get this fight. That's the bottom line for me. That's always been the bottom line. I've said from the beginning that I don't believe Deontay Wilder's afraid of Joshua. And I certainly don't believe Joshua's afraid of Deontay Wilder. I've never taken this irrational fanboy position that most of the Deontay Wilder fanboys have taken. They've taken the position that Joshua's a coward, he's an English muffin, he's scared, he don't want that smoke, he don't want that work. This is the position they're taking. Well, for those irrational fanboys, I once again ask you the question. Since you believe Joshua's scared, why doesn't Shelly Finkel believe Joshua's scared? Even Deontay Wilder himself, the guy you're caping for, the guy you're fanboying for, even Wilder himself has said Joshua wanted to take the $50 million offer and that fight. So how can he be scared then if he wanted to take it? Even though Wilder has contradicted himself on that, and again, the Wilder fanboys are silent on Wilder's contradictions. But yeah, Finkel certainly has said in this interview he don't think Joshua's scared. Explain that. Anyway, let me know how you guys feel about everything I've talked about in this video. Drop your comments in the comment section below. It's happening, I'm out.